Hello and welcome to this episode of the Ranting Atheist podcast. So we'll be listening to the deconversion story of a friend. They refer to themselves as an agnostic Christian, but as the story goes on, you will finally understand where they stand and why they refer to themselves as that. It was a lengthy conversation, it was a tell-it-all, and before I knew it, 2 hours, 30 minutes had passed. So I have to divide this into 3 so that we can listen to it fully, because loading you with 2 hours, 30 minutes at once is not something that is convenient. So this will be in 3 parts. I hope you learn a thing or two from their story. So if you haven't subscribed up Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube and other places you find podcasts, check out the show notes for links you may find useful, especially our Discord. We would like you to join our Discord. We are building it up little by little, and this is where I believe we can create a community of people that have sense. There are too many idiots in this country. We need to start looking for the sensible people and start gathering ourselves up, sharing ideas, learning from each other, and look for a way to make this Nigeria a saner society, at least before we all die. So please enjoy the deconversion story of Obed. Hello Obed, and you are welcome to the Ranting Atheist podcast. How you doing now?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you.
The Ranting Atheist.
Yes, so thank you for reaching out. Thank you for wanting to share your story, because people don't believe that not everybody believe in God, so they always shock them. But we shall see, So we are speaking with. Can we know you? Can we know what do you do? We are speaking with Obed. Yes. Well, look, if that's comfortable, share what you are comfortable with. So, location. Are you Gen Z? Are you millennial? What do you do for a living? And any other thing you want to add?
Okay, so I am Obed. What do I do for a living? I'm a researcher. What else? Location, yeah. I live in Port Harcourt, Nigeria.
Cool.
And what else? Gen Z, millennial. I am Gen Alpha.
Yeah, you're not serious. Oh, not why me. So you're 13 years old, basically.
More or less.
Why? I think that does research. This is child labor. We need to arrest your workplace. We need to arrest them. They are committing labor.
Well, it's in compliance with child labor laws.
It's not. Children don't do. If I work out, when I say researcher, the kind of researcher that comes to my head is so maybe is someone that reads and like a professor or someone in the lab. So kind of what kind of researcher are you?
Okay, so the reading and writing type, right? So the person who, how do I explain this? Okay, so I read what other people have done.
Mm-hmm.
I go out in the field. I gather data.
Okay.
I analyze this data and come out with new information. Possibly, when I'm lucky, I come out with new information. When I am not, I make some adjustments to the old ones.
Okay.
And at other times, I just, if I'm very, very lucky, I might come up with a theory. if I'm very lucky.
Theory. Anyway.
So that's the type of research I am.
Okay. Nice.
I unfortunately do not wear white lab coats.
That one comes to my mind. I was like, you should take me some goggles and some beakers and some test tube. I'm like, we need to do some centrifuge. We need to do some.
Oh no! So I am in the social sciences,
Okay. So,
but my work also intersects into the humanities. So my research interests are communication and media, gender theory, queer theory, and biblical studies. Right?
Interesting.
So that's around where I operate.
Okay. This is interesting. So nice. So when it comes to religious thinking, what do you identify as? Where do you stand? Are you an atheist? Are you religious, or you don't do labels, agnostic, or still en route to somewhere?
Okay. So I identify as an agnostic Christian, and I always like to clarify this,
Okay.
right? So I hold Christianity as tradition that was handed to me by my ancestors. Right?
Your immediate
I always
ancestors.
use this example. Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, it generates, so my parents, my grandparents.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's your grandparents that I'm thinking of, not your parents,
I always use this example.
I assume they were alive.
Oh, yeah, they are. So, yeah, my immediate pastors. So, I always use the example of, think of your uncle, right, who has converted to Christianity, right? But just can't leave the gods of our ancestors, So I am your uncle, but Christianity is the gods of our ancestors.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
But generally, I hold to agnosticism.
Okay. So in the agnostic side, what exactly is your leaning with agnosticism? What makes you lean towards agnosticism?
Okay. Funny enough, I actually became agnostic from reading the Bible, It came
Ironic.
from reading the Bible and seeing all the different perspectives and how, the wisdom literature versus the Deuteronomistic literature, Paul versus Peter versus James. Just reading through all those things. I mean, I do love the Bible. I grew up on the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting literature. It's really, really good it's really, really good literary work, right?
Yeah.
And I think, so just looking at it, I was struck by all the conversations and the fact that there were just so many different ways of viewing God. And that was how I ended up agnostic.
So you're agnostic, like
Strange.
I don't know whether this thing is for real or how do I put it now? But I still follow the tradition as a Christian-ish. Am I close enough?
Okay, so I'm agnostic as in I believe that we don't know anything about God. Really don't.
Okay.
And we can't know anything about God if there is a God.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
If there is a God, we can't know anything about them or it, whatever pronouns you choose. We can't. So that is why I would always say it's technically impossible. We can't know. It's just an impossibility. So
That's what I always tell.
and I think I came here.
Continue.
Here when I actually. Yeah, I said I came here when I actually decided. When I, I think how I knew I became agnostic was at the point where I said man-made God. And the point where I said that from a very genuine place, I knew that there was no going back.
Wait,
I was never going to be a nominal
God?
Christian. I was never going to be an ordinary Christian. The idea of God in general.
Like everyone presented so far.
The idea of God in general. I came to a place where I saw that God is a man-made invention. And it was the moment I said that, and I said it to myself, I knew that there was no returning. There was no returning.
Hold on. I think we are going to the spoilers. Hold on. We are going to that. Wait. What you just said.
Oh, okay.
Let's back up. Let's back up to the beginning and start from how it all began before to go to the process of your evolution of your belief system. So you like a religious background from your earliest memory, how it evolved, things you experienced. Before we get to this point, I think this is the end game that we are giving spoilers. Here you get.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Yeah, so I was raised in a very conservative household, very religiously conservative household.
Define very. Everybody's very different.
My female. Oh, okay. So my dad. Okay, this is going to sound extreme, right? My dad. On mornings, any morning whatsoever, be it a weekday, weekend, we used to have this thing called excellent virginal studies, right? So it was founded on the idea of the 10 wise virgins. I believe they were 10. Yeah. So the different groups of virgins who went out to meet the bridegroom, yada, yada, yada. You know the story.
One with a lamp or something like that. With a lamp.
So my dad was like, that one.
Oh.
So my dad was like, you see those people, right? There was a third group. There should have been a third group that was really, that according to him, he terms it, they were excellently wise. The group that never put out their lamps, right? They had extra oil. The lamp never went off. It was just perpetually burning, right? So we used to have that. So that was the base idea. So we always had to be ready for when Jesus is coming, you know. And so I grew up from a very young age. I remember, oh God, my foundational memories are thinking about eschatology, thinking about, and these were things my dad used to sit us down in the living room after like morning devotion in the morning, right? And he didn't care whether it was a school day or not. He would give him, you must learn, right? So I used to go to school late. Yeah, I was that kid who used to go to school late because of this, right? So you must. They did.
God damn it.
They did, but at some point they wouldn't. They wouldn't, because I would beg the person that is taking me to school, whichever sibling it was, to please go up to the teacher and plead with the teacher not to flog me. Mm-hmm. And they would understand, because they would really know that it wasn't my fault. Mm-hmm. So I remember these things. We would learn about the end times. Sure. We would not only study the book of Revelations. I like till now, I still know. Oh God. I mean, people were scared of Revelations. I wasn't, because
you've been baptized.
I grew up on this shit. You know? Exactly. And then we won't only study Revelation, we'll study Daniel, we'll study every single book that has to do with the end times, you know? So by the age of 12, I knew whatever you're saying, I know it. I can have debates with you on eschatology. You know, because my dad had trained me like that since I was a child. Mm-hmm. So that was exactly. So my Christianity was hinged on that foundation, on the apocalyptic fear of you must be ready. Jesus will come at any time. 2 will be working in the field, the one will be taken and the other left, you know. So I grew up on that, and eventually at some point my dad was running a church. He had his own church.
I would be surprised if he wasn't.
And later on, he actually he wasn't able to run the church anymore, because he was also into real estate. So he was quite a big deal in the Bohako real estate business. So he left. He wasn't able to run the church, so the church folded. And you know, the funny part was that the church was in our house. We had like a really, really big compound. So the church was in our house, and people used to come to our house. So you can't escape it.
I don't feel like going to church.
The name of the church was Peace Church. Exactly. So there will be like, so if you ask, my siblings were a lot older, yes, but if you ask my siblings about Peace Church, right, they will tell you, oh, the time where you would not attend Peace Church was when my mom was going somewhere and you begged with everything in you to follow my mom.
Oh
my God. And yeah, or for me, when I wouldn't attend was when I would go on holidays to be with my aunts, my maternal aunts.
Okay.
So going on holidays to be with my maternal aunt, my aunt was a lecturer, right? A really, really good one, actually. She was a lecturer, and she taught me the importance of studying, you know. She was also very disciplined. She was a very, very disciplined person. She would always sit me down and tell me, oh, you're a very clever boy, you know. You should always put your head down, study your books and study everything. Ask questions. Ask me questions. I won't keep anything from you. Ask me, I will answer you. And I would ask, and she would answer. And I'll be like, oh, okay, interesting.
Was she a believer?
So, but when I would come back to my house, yes, she was. She was an Anglican.
Okay.
Well, when I come back to my house, and I love going to her house because my cousin, I used to play with my cousin as well. She used to live with her, so we used to play together.
Okay.
I mean, normal things you do as a child. But my dad wasn't really having it because my dad had this thing where he believed that it was only Pentecostals who were going to make it to heaven. Yeah, so he believed that it's only Pentecostals, the Anglicans, the Catholics. They were just
the Catholics, man, the fucking class Catholics.
The Catholics were worse than the Anglicans.
Every 2 months we have a civil war between Catholics and Pentecostals on Twitter. They drag each other. We are not the ones that speak gibberish to say we are talking to God. Lebo saka baka rubo sobo. Oh, what else they yab each other?
So I remember all these things were in the water. There was always the fights and arguments between my dad and my aunt. And then my parents had, just shortly before I was born, my parents had come out of this church. It was a messy breakup. It was called Greater Evangelism World Crusade. It was a very messy breakup. It was not clean at all. Like, there was...
The church divided.
There were feelings hurt. There were things that... Well, it was not even the church divided. It was just my dad that left, and he didn't leave in a good way. You know, and it was not even so. Looking back at it, my dad was not exactly wrong, but he did not. You know, there's a way to be diplomatic about certain things,
especially with church.
He did not agree with some of the things that were done in the church, and he was actually very right. It was a grave injustice that was being done, right? But he didn't exactly say it well. So he actually got kicked out. He got suspended. And he left, right? So, but a good portion of my mom's family were still in the church. So he really, really didn't like me associating with my mom's family. And I loved associating with my mom's family. So there would be, when I would go on holidays, there would be, when is Obed the boy coming back? There will be all of that, right? And the occasional facts and all of that. And it was just the thing. Growing up, because of this church here, this church has laid the spiritual foundations for my parents, right? And growing up, I remember my siblings, my female siblings, would not wear trousers. They were not wearing trousers. It was later when my dad was not in the picture because he had some legal issues. So I remember once one of my sisters went to visit him and she asked if they could start wearing trousers. And by this time she had graduated university. And that was when he said yes, that they could start wearing trousers. And it was always a historic moment.
Is it her or her? Which one?
None of them. A different one.
Okay.
So I have 7 siblings. Yeah.
Excuse me?
So after this, yes, I do have 7 siblings.
Wow. You're the last?
So, yes, I am the last.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So after all of this, right? My mom started attending Redeemed, and it was really, really nice attending Redeemed because it was almost a breath of fresh air from what I was used to.
You attended the model Redeemed churches.
Yeah, well, not even the modern Redeemed churches. It was the regular Redeemed, right?
In model, if you went to the classical, those ones are they are conservative fuckers.
Yeah, actually, it was one of those ones, but it was still a step above what I was used to.
So you're telling me, holy shit.
Yeah. So I remember all of that. And going to this reading, it felt like I was normal, right? When people ask me what church, I remember when my classmates would ask me what church I used to attend. Previously, I couldn't really say per se. I would just be like, oh, we attend one church like that. But when we started attending reading, I felt normal. I felt like I could say the church I attended and just say it's redeemed. So it felt good. But eventually my dad got back and he had moved to a different church that was not redeemed. And he, at some point, he insisted that my mom started following him, and it was drama, like serious drama.
Of course.
He actually came to the church, and there was promotion in the church. So eventually the pastor just told her, you know what, just follow this man and go.
You obey your husband type shit.
Started going to that church. It was even this church. So this church was even more liberal than redeemed. So we're like, okay, it's not a bad idea. Eventually, so we went. We're attending the church. Eventually, and before we started attending this church, there were like a lot of financial issues, but we started attending, and somehow and my dad wasn't exactly we weren't poor by any standards, but somehow we had hit rock bottom at some point. And so when we started attending this new church, it was more like we were bouncing back.
Okay.
There was it was not so, things weren't so hard anymore. We were doing well, you know, and we also had like a church family who would want to protect us and fight for us and stuff like that. So we were doing that. And I remember we used to, when we started attending church, we would, one of my house helps would go out to the junction and call a taxi, right? We didn't have both at the time. This was so long ago. So they would go out, call a taxi, and depending on how many people are around, we would church. But eventually, we were able to, we had somehow, we had some form of financial breakthrough, and we got a house in like a high route area. And we weren't, it's not like we were living in our own house, but we just got a nicer house, you know, a nicer, finer house. So it was kind of like we're becoming the modern family, you know. And then we moved to a gated community. It was nice. We got a nice car, stuff like that. Stuff was going well, right? But it lasted for a while, and eventually things started to take a downturn, right? And at this time was when I was beginning to struggle. I was dealing with some kind of depression, a really, really severe depression. And I was really young at the time. And I remember just being locked up in the bathroom and just crying because I hated myself. Hated myself so deeply. And my mom was not having this. So here's the funny part, right? My house helps were snitches. Damn. Big time snitches. They would go, run to my mom, tell her, yo, this is what Obed is doing. And my mom would come to the bathroom with a cane. And yeah, and she'd be like, if you want to cry, I'll make you cry. And she'll flog me out of that bathroom. So eventually I learned that I was meant to bottle up everything. Just keep it all inside, And then it was all like that, And somehow one of my brothers began to get close to me. So we began to form a really strong bond. He would always take me out. He was like, so he was the brother that I could love and trust, and he was a support in that time, right? So, but suddenly he had to travel for school, and when he traveled, just around that time, he was also getting serious at another church, all right? And I always was like, oh wow, okay, so since you have it better at your church and you're like giving me so much love, right? I want to be following you to your church, right? So I used to always go with him to his church, and he was like a pastor-like figure, even though he didn't have like a pastor tag to his name, but he was like a pastor-like figure in this church. It was almost like a youth pastor.
Okay.
So it was nice. Eventually, he traveled. He went abroad for school, and we were only talking like by phone. And at this time, my depression got worse. It got really, really bad. So, and I didn't know how to handle it. I really did not know. So there were so many things going on, and it was almost like the world was on me, and I used to sort of find some level of comfort in church. I started going to church on my own, and I would not miss weekly activities. I would go to church and just be at peace at church. And eventually, eventually my family moved over to this church, right? This church where my brother was a pastor-like figure. Yeah. So it became a family church, and I was grateful for that, because now it didn't seem, there was not the, oh, you can't go to that church today, you have to follow us, right? That situation was no longer there. So we could all just go to church, and we're going. But I discovered that I was not getting better at all. And prior to this time, right, I had dealt with gender dysphoria just before, but somehow at this point, it wasn't gender dysphoria. It was more like a deep self-loathing. Right? I just hated myself. And it was so deep, and it was so painful, so heavy, that I just couldn't stand it. So eventually, I went off to secondary school in Akwa Ibom. And for the first time in my life, as an effeminate human being that walks on the earth, right, I felt loved in Akwa Ibom, and I was at a boarding school. So this was the first time I was getting attention like this, So being an effeminate person, I could get like attention from older people for like, oh, my intellects, but never for my body, And it was almost a revelation to me that I could get attention and be loved for my body. So I remember people, like boys, always wanted to hang around me, the cool guy from Port Harcourt, the cool hot guy from Port Harcourt, by the way. And they're everywhere. Yeah, and everywhere. So people would follow. So the senior students would be calling, the name they had for me was Ikamba Foot. So Ikamba Foot translates to big ass, kind of.
Whoa.
So
were they correct, or they were just exaggerating?
Well, at the time they were correct. Now they are not. Yeah. So it was nice because I could see that I was turning heads. There was, oh my God. So it was so bad that people who were senior students, like SS3 students, used to fight over me. They were like confused. So there would be this one who would be like, oh, he's mine. And there'll be this one who would be like, no, he's mine. And you just have people just going crazy. And yes, I did have relationships with a few of these people.
You can't miss the opportunity.
It was just, yeah. But I think this was a time where I discovered sexuality. And even though I wasn't labeling, but I was just, okay, whatever is happening now, I'm liking it. So let's just go with the flow.
Have you discovered it?
It was also, it was also the time I began to fall sick. Right, I began to fall sick. There were just so many complications. Every few weeks or so, my mom will have to come from. I think so. Well, no, not really. So every few weeks, my mom will have to come over from Port Harcourt to take me home because I will be sick. And my parents are not young, right? So she was in her 60s at the time, so it wasn't an easy thing to be doing. So she was like, okay, here's what we're going to do, right? We're going to move you from this school and you're going to start going to school in Port Harcourt and you'll be a day student. And yeah, at first I was excited for this because I just generally thought that life would be as rosy as it was in Akwa Ibom. But I came to Port Harcourt and I found heat. I found heat, like heat. My God. So I found I was hated by my classmates, hated by teachers, hated by the school authority
because you are effeminate.
But I was in this. Yeah, and it was wild. So I started spiraling again, right? And eventually, somebody acted on this, right? So a girl was just picking on me, right? And I went and reported to the teacher. There was a teacher in the class when this was going on, right? So I went and reported to the teacher. The teacher will be like, oh, forget it. And I'll go back, continue doing my work, and the teacher was like copying note on the board, right? So
It's back in class.
the girl would continue, I would go report again, come back, the teacher would be like, teacher won't do anything. So at some point, the teacher left and this girl continued. And this time I reacted. And this girl decided that it was going to turn into a fight. And it did. And my classmates did not even want to even remotely support me. Like, no, everybody hated me. So nobody was going to support me. And oh God. So they went, called the teacher. No, they didn't even call the teacher. They called the vice principal, and that one took us to his office, and without hearing anything, he said he was going to flog me. And I said, no, you're not. No, you're not. And he said, are you challenging me? And he started flogging me, like where they just flog it anywhere.
Anyhow, wherever he is.
And I ran out and ran to the principal's office. The principal was not there. Yeah. So I remember there was this one person at the school. She was the secretary to the principal. She was the only one who actually liked me. And she came out and she said, oh, what's going on? So the vice principal came, he was shouting, he was like, kids boy. So she told me that I had to kneel down there at the office and just wait, that I was going to get suspended. I got suspended. By this time, my brother had come back. My brother was in Nigeria. So I was like, but funny thing was, he was traveling again.
Masters.
He was traveling again. And I was kneeling down. Eventually, the principal got back and he typed my suspension letter. And my aunt came to pick me from school because I was there with my cousin. We're both going to the same school. So my aunt came to pick me from school and she was furious. But not with me, though. She was furious with the school.
Nice.
And then my other cousin heard about it and she was furious. Because the school, this is a school that is supposed to be taking care of children, right? And you didn't, because they had heard from me and I told them what happened and they were like, no, you don't even deserve to be suspended here. So my other cousin heard about it and she wanted to go to the school to actually fight with the principal. But my mom actually stopped her and my mom said, no, you can't go. So eventually my mom went to the school with my older brother and they spoke to the principal. So the principal shortened my suspension because from 2 weeks to 1 week. And he said, oh, it was, and you know the funny part, I got to find out that they had given the girl a few days.
Imagine. The bias was so clear.
Like, okay. Exactly. And I was like, oh, no problem. And my brother, just the day after my brother went to the school, he left Nigeria. And I was like, yo, how are you expecting me to navigate? You just came back. How are you expecting me to navigate this whole thing on my own? Like, how? And he was like, yo, don't worry, I'll be praying for you. I will send you stuff. You know, you've always got a big brother. And I'll be like, okay, no problem. And yeah, he continued to be there, but he was in another country.
Yeah, nothing like physical presence.
And by this time, he had become a pastor. He had become a pastor, so he also had like more commitments, and he was going to school as well. So he was just busy. So I was like, okay, so I'm just all alone here. So by the time I go back to school, I think everybody had gotten that toxicity out of their system because they had finally done something. Right? They had gotten me. So me coming back to school was okay, let's come to a truce. And this was not everybody, this was just my classmates. So I came to a truce with these guys, and these guys were, I began to get friends and people who would, even though they were not really accepting Sha, but they were just like, okay, we can vibe with you. You're somewhat okay.
Yeah.
And just when that was happening, my sister came in from the UK and said she went to my school and asked my principal why my grades were not doing well. And the principal said, I don't know, ask him.